Captain Daeho Kim stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Harmony as it approached Nexus Prime. The massive space station hung in the void like a jewel made of metal and light. Ships from dozens of alien species moved around it in perfect formation. Each vessel looked different from the others, but they all shared one thing in common. They belonged to the Galactic Council, and Earth did not. Daeho had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. He learned the languages and studied the customs and practiced the diplomatic protocols until he could recite them in his sleep. Behind him on the bridge stood Mira Park and Woo Jin Lee. Mira had mastered 17 alien languages in just 2 years, while Woo Jin had analyzed every military engagement the Council had fought in the past century. They were the best Earth had to offer. The communication system crackled to life with an alien voice speaking in perfect English. "Harmony, you are cleared to dock at Bay 7. Prepare for inspection and quarantine procedures." Daeho nodded to his crew. This was it. After 500 years of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, they were about to find out where they stood among the stars. The docking bay was enormous. Ships from the Vorthon Empire gleamed like silver daggers, while vessels from the Nexari Collective hummed with strange energy. The humans felt small as they walked through corridors filled with beings they had only seen in their intercepted transmissions. Some aliens towered over them while others skittered along the walls on multiple legs. A few floated in mechanical suits that translated their thoughts into audible words. The council chamber was a masterpiece of engineering. Thousands of representatives sat in a sphere that rotated slowly around a central platform. Each species had their own section with environmental controls suited to their biology. The humans were given 3 seats in a small observation area marked with the symbol for unrecognized species. Daeho walked to the central platform when his name was called. The translation device around his neck felt heavy as he began to speak. "Honored members of the Galactic Council, I come before you as a representative of humanity. We have achieved faster-than-light travel and wish to join your alliance of civilized worlds. We offer our friendship, our knowledge, and our commitment to peace." A massive being covered in scales and wearing ceremonial robes stood up from the Vorthon section. This was Emperor Vextar himself, the most powerful individual in the galaxy. His voice boomed through the chamber as he spoke. "The species called humanity has been observed for decades. Our scientists have studied their behavior, their history, and their nature. They are unsuitable for membership in this council." Mira stepped forward and activated her own translator. "Honorable Emperor, we understand your concerns, but humanity has changed. We have ended war on our planet and united under a single government. We have explored our solar system peacefully and developed technologies that could benefit all council members." A crystalline being from the Nexari Collective began to pulse with different colors. The translation came through as a cold, mechanical voice. "Change is irrelevant. Genetic and cultural analysis indicates this species possesses aggressive tendencies that exceed acceptable parameters. They wage war for abstract concepts they call honor and freedom. Such behavior threatens the stability we have maintained for 3,000 years. Woo Jin could not stay silent any longer. Every species in this chamber has a history of conflict. The Vorthons conquered 17 worlds before joining the Council. The Nexari absorbed 3 other machine civilizations through force. The Altarians fought a civil war that lasted 2 centuries. Why are human conflicts different? The chamber filled with sounds that the translators struggled to interpret. Some species made clicking noises, while others hummed at frequencies that hurt human ears. Finally, Emperor Vextar raised one massive arm, and silence returned. "The difference, young human, is that we learned to control our violent nature. Humanity shows no such wisdom. Your species still celebrates warriors and names their ships after weapons. You glorify struggle when civilized beings seek only harmony." Daeho felt his temper rising, but forced himself to remain calm. "We name our ships after concepts we value. This vessel is called Harmony, because that is what we seek. Yes, we have warriors. Because sometimes good people must fight to protect what matters. We do not apologize for defending ourselves or others who cannot defend themselves. A new voice entered the conversation. It came from a section filled with insect-like beings who moved with perfect coordination. These were the Kythera, and they had not spoken in council sessions for over 50 years. The small human speaks truth. This council fears what it cannot control and calls fear wisdom. The Kythera remember when courage was valued alongside peace. Emperor Vextar's scales darkened with anger. The Kythera lost their voice in this council. Because they could not adapt to civilized discourse, they are not a model for newcomers to follow. The decision before us is simple. Do we allow a dangerous species access to technologies and knowledge that could threaten every peaceful world in the galaxy? The vote was swift and decisive. Thousands of council members activated their voting devices, and the results appeared on screens throughout the chamber. Species after species voted to deny humanity membership. The Vorthons voted as a bloc followed by their client states. The Nexari calculations showed only rejection. Even species that had never interacted with humans voted against them based on the testimony they had heard. Only the Kythera voted in favor of human membership. Their representatives stood on multiple legs and spoke in clicks that took several seconds to translate. Humanity possesses something this council has forgotten. They have the courage to risk everything for principles that matter more than safety. This galaxy grows weak under the protection of those who fear change. The final tally was devastating. Of the 147 council members, only one voted for humanity. 12 abstained, mostly from species too small to matter. The rest voted for exile. Not just denial of membership, but active exclusion from all council space. Emperor Vextar delivered the sentence with obvious satisfaction. By unanimous vote of this council, the species known as humanity is declared a contamination risk to galactic civilization. They are hereby banned from all council space and prohibited from contact with member species. Any attempt to violate this exile will be considered an act of war. Deho felt the words hit him like physical blows. 3 years of preparation and centuries of human dreams were ending in complete rejection. But as he looked around the chamber, he saw something else. Fear. These powerful beings were afraid of humanity, despite their overwhelming technological and numerical advantages. Mi-Ra and Wu-Jin flanked him as they walked back to their observation seats. The council session continued as if nothing important had happened. Representatives discussed trade routes and mining rights while 3 humans sat in stunned silence. They had come offering friendship and been told they were too dangerous to exist among civilized people. The journey back to the Harmony felt like a walk to an execution. Alien security forces escorted them through corridors that now seemed hostile. Other species watched them pass with expressions that needed no translation. Curiosity, fear, and sometimes disgust crossed alien faces as word of the council decision spread on the bridge of their ship. Deho stared at the tactical display showing their escort. 12 council warships surrounded the Harmony as it prepared to leave Nexus Prime. The message was clear. Humanity was not welcome, and any attempt to return would be met with overwhelming force. Wu-Jin broke the silence first. Captain, what are our orders? Do we return to Earth and report our failure? Do we accept exile and hide in our own solar system while the galaxy moves on without us? Deho thought about the billions of humans waiting for news from this mission. Children who dreamed of visiting alien worlds, and scientists who hoped to share knowledge with other civilizations. All of them were now criminals in the eyes of galactic law simply for being human. Mi-Ra was studying the communication logs from their stay at Nexus Prime. Captain I intercepted some interesting transmissions while we were docked. Several species expressed private doubts about the council decision. The Altarians seemed particularly uncomfortable with Emperor Vextar's dominance. And did you notice how quickly the Nexari supported the Vorthons? There may be more politics here than simple fear of humanity, the escort ships were maintaining. perfect formation as they approached the edge of Council space. Soon the Harmony would cross an invisible line and become an outlaw vessel in the eyes of galactic civilization. But Deho was beginning to see opportunity where others saw only defeat. He activated the ship-wide communication system and spoke to his crew of 200 volunteers. "Fellow humans, we came here seeking friendship and were told we are too dangerous for civilized society. They fear our nature, our history, and our potential. Perhaps they are right to be afraid." The crew listened in silence as their captain continued. "We could return to Earth and accept their judgment. We could hide in our solar system and pretend the galaxy does not exist. Or we can show them what dangerous really looks like. They want to call us outcasts, so let us embrace that role. They think we cannot survive without their protection, so let us prove them wrong." As the Harmony crossed into uncharted space, Deho made a decision that would... So young Choi stood on the observation deck of the colony ship New Seoul as it approached the planet they would call Haven. 4 years had passed since the Council rejection, and humanity had not spent that time sitting idle. Instead of retreating to Earth, they had launched the greatest colonization effort in human history. 50 ships carrying 2 million volunteers had spread across the galactic rim, searching for worlds the Council had overlooked. Haven was perfect for their needs. The planet sat in a system the Council had marked as uninhabitable due to unusual radiation from its star. Human scientists had solved that problem in 6 months by developing new shielding technology that actually made them stronger than before. What the aliens saw as a flaw humanity turned into an advantage. Jin-Woo Nam watched from the engineering section as automated systems deployed the first habitat domes. His team had revolutionized construction technology by studying alien designs, captured from Council databases. The new domes could be erected in days rather than months, and could withstand attacks that would level traditional buildings. Every human colony was being built like a fortress because everyone knew the Council would not ignore them forever. The communication array crackled with reports from other colony fleets. Ye Jin-yoon was establishing a mining operation on a world, rich in materials the Council considered worthless. Her people had discovered these substances were perfect for building the new type of engines Jin-Woo had designed. Engines that were faster and more efficient than anything the Council used. So Young activated the colony-wide communication system to address the 20,000 people now calling Haven home. "My fellow humans, 6 months ago, this world was empty. Rock. Today we have cities that house thousands and factories that produce technology the Council thought impossible. We are not just surviving exile, we are thriving because of it. The real breakthrough had come 3 months earlier when human scouts made contact with the Kythera. The insect-like beings who had voted for humanity in the Council chamber had been quietly building their own network of hidden colonies. They had been waiting centuries for someone brave enough to challenge Council authority. The first Kythera delegation arrived on Haven aboard ships that seemed to be grown rather than built. Their leader was a being humans called Click, due to the distinctive sound it made when speaking. Click had served on the Council for 200 years before the Kythera were stripped of their voting rights for questioning Vorthon policies. Click and So Young met in the Colony Command Center surrounded by holographic displays showing human expansion across the rim. The insect being moved with fluid grace as it gestured toward the star charts. "Your species adapts faster than any we have observed. In 6 months, you have accomplished what takes most civilizations decades. The Council fears this ability because they have forgotten how to change." So Young studied the Kythera leader carefully. The aliens had technology humanity needed, but she would not make the same mistakes Earth had made with the Council. "Any alliance we form must be between equals. We will not accept a junior partnership or allow ourselves to be controlled by anyone. The Council rejected us because we refused to submit, and we will not submit to you either." Click made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Submission is what the Council demands from all members. The Kythera learned this truth too late to save ourselves. Your species has learned it before making that mistake. This is why we believe humanity can succeed where we failed. The negotiations took weeks but resulted in something unprecedented in galactic history. The Human-Kythera Alliance was a partnership between species that had both been rejected by the Council. Humans provided innovation and adaptability, while the Kythera offered advanced biotechnology and 3 centuries of experience with Council. Politics Jin Wu worked with Kythera engineers to design new types of warships that combined the best of both technologies. Human creativity and alien biotechnology created vessels that could repair themselves and adapt to new threats. The first prototype emerged from the shipyards of Haven, looking like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The ship was named Defiance, and it perfectly captured humanity's response to exile. Rather than hiding from the Council, it would seek them out and show them the consequences of their decision. Jinwu stood in the ship's command center watching as systems came online. Every circuit was protected by Kythera bioarmor, while human computers provided tactical advantages no Council ship possessed. The first test of their new alliance came when a Council patrol discovered the Zephyrian trade convoy that had been secretly supplying human colonies. The Zephyrians were nomadic merchants who had never been offered Council membership because they refused to settle on permanent worlds. They had been trading with humans for months, providing rare materials in exchange. For Earth music and art, Hai Jin was aboard the lead Zephyrian vessel when Council ships appeared on the sensors. The Vorthon captain demanded the convoy submit to search and inspection. When the Zephyrians refused, the Council ships opened fire without warning. 3 merchant vessels were destroyed before they could even raise shields. The Defiance arrived, 30 minutes later, responding to an emergency transmission from the convoy. Jinwu commanded the ship personally because no human had enough experience with the new systems to train others. What he found was a massacre. Council warships were systematically destroying helpless merchant vessels while their crews begged for mercy. Jinwu opened a communication channel to the Vorthon flagship. This is the human vessel Defiance. You will cease fire immediately and withdraw from this system. The Council captain responded with what the translator interpreted as laughter, followed by a demand for immediate surrender. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes. The Defiance moved like a living thing, dodging Council weapons, while its own systems adapted to enemy fire patterns. Kythera bioarmor absorbed energy blasts that should have been fatal, while human computers calculated precise strike points on enemy ships. When the engagement ended, 5 Council vessels were disabled, and the Vorthon flagship was drifting powerless. Jinwu could have destroyed the Council ships, but chose a different message. He transported medical supplies to the damaged vessels, along with a recorded statement that would soon spread across the galaxy. The Galactic Council declared humanity too dangerous for civilized space. Today, they learned the difference between dangerous and evil. We could have destroyed you, but chose mercy. Remember this when you explain to your superiors why you attacked defenseless merchants. The rescue of the Zephyrian convoy sent shockwaves through Council space. For 3,000 years, no one had successfully challenged Council authority. Member. Species who had grievances against the Vorthans or Nexari began to quietly contact human agents. The Altarian Republic sent secret envoys asking about joining the Alliance. So Young found herself coordinating a growing network of species who felt oppressed by Council policies. The Drakmari had been forced to give up their military traditions. The Solari were prohibited from exploring beyond their home system. The hegemony species were taxed so heavily they could barely feed their populations. All of them were looking for alternatives to Council membership. The network grew stronger each month as more species offered support to the human cause. Some provided intelligence about Council fleet movements, while others shared technology that had been restricted by Council regulations. A few even offered to hide human ships in their territory when Council patrols came searching. Heejin established contact with resistance movements on dozens of Council worlds. Beings who had spent their lives accepting Vorthon domination, suddenly, had hope that change was possible. The humans taught them that civilization did not require submission to those who claimed authority. The Council response was predictable and heavy-handed. They increased patrols along the rim and declared any species found supporting humanity would face severe punishment. Several worlds were placed under military occupation when their governments refused to sign new loyalty oaths. The Altarians were stripped of their fleet command positions and replaced with Vorthan officers, but every harsh council action drove more species toward the human alliance. The network that had started with desperate humans and exiled Kythera was becoming a shadow government that operated in the spaces between council authority. Trade routes that had been controlled for millennia were suddenly unreliable. As merchant convoys chose human protection over council taxation, So Young stood in the command center of Haven, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. Human colonies were multiplying faster than council forces could track them. Each new settlement was built with the lessons learned from previous ones, making them harder to find and more difficult to attack. The exiled humans were becoming something the council had never faced before. Jin Wu entered the command center carrying data from the latest Defiance mission. His ship had raided a council supply depot and captured enough equipment to outfit 10 more vessels. The raid had taken place deep in council space, proving that human ships could strike anywhere and disappear before reinforcements arrived. Click arrived with intelligence from Kythera agents embedded throughout council bureaucracy. The insect being's translation device conveyed growing panic among council leadership. Seung-ho Kang crouched behind a shipping container on the council trade station orbiting Vorthan Prime. 6 months of careful planning had led to this moment when human operatives would strike at the heart of the galactic economy. The station processed rare minerals that powered council warships, and without it their fleet would be grounded within weeks. Beside him waited Yoonji Lim, who had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission. She would pilot a captured council fighter through the station's defenses, while Sung-ho and his team planted charges on the critical support systems. If they succeeded, the explosion would look like an industrial accident. If they failed, humanity would lose some of its most valuable agents. 3 years had passed since the first human raids began, and the council still refused to admit they were fighting a war. They called the attacks piracy and blamed them on criminal organizations that had nothing to do with humanity. This fiction was becoming harder to maintain as human operations grew more sophisticated and targeted. Sung-ho had spent his career in Earth intelligence before the council rejection changed everything. He understood that conventional warfare would destroy humanity because the council had overwhelming numerical superiority. But asymmetric conflict was different. A few determined operatives could paralyze systems that took decades to build. The team moved through the station's maintenance corridors using stolen access codes provided by Tame and Shin. The former diplomat had become humanity's most effective recruiter, turning dozens of alien species against their council overlords. His network provided intelligence that made operations like this possible. Yoonji's voice crackled through the communication implant hidden behind Seung-ho's ear. Security patrol approaching your position in 30 seconds. Recommend immediate. Concealment in Maintenance Shaft 7. Her fighter was invisible to council sensors thanks to technology that combined human stealth systems with Kythera biotechnology. The patrol passed without detecting the human presence, but Seung-ho knew their window was closing. Council security had improved significantly since the early raids when human agents could move freely through their facilities. Now, every operation required perfect timing and flawless execution. The charges were placed exactly where Kythera engineers had calculated they would cause maximum damage. The explosions would sever the station's connection to the planetary power grid while destroying the mineral processing equipment. Rebuilding would take months and cost resources the council could not spare. As they prepared to withdraw, Sung-ho received an unexpected message from Tae-min. Intelligence indicated a high-value target was present on the station. Admiral Vector of the Vorthan Third Fleet was inspecting security improvements personally. This was an opportunity too valuable to ignore. Yoonji protested the mission change. through their private channel. Admiral, the plan does not include assassination attempts. Adding new objectives increases risk of discovery and capture. Recommend maintaining original mission parameters and withdrawing as scheduled, but Seung-ho understood the strategic value of eliminating Vector. The Admiral commanded the fleet responsible for attacking human colonies and had personally ordered the destruction of 3 settlements. His death would send a message that no council leader was safe from human retaliation. The team split into 2 groups, with half proceeding to the extraction point, while Seung-ho led a smaller unit toward the administrative section. They had 20 minutes before the charges detonated and the station descended into chaos. 20 minutes to reach one of the most protected individuals in the galaxy. The administrative section was heavily guarded, but human intelligence had identified weaknesses in council security protocols. Alien guards followed rigid procedures that made their movements predictable, while their sensors were calibrated for known threats. Humans represented something new that existing systems could not easily detect. Admiral Vector was reviewing security footage in a conference room surrounded by his personal staff. The Vorthan leader stood 8 feet tall, covered in ceremonial armor that could deflect most weapons. But human assassins had learned to target vulnerabilities that alien designers never considered. Seung-ho waited in the ventilation system above the conference room as Vector dismissed his guards to examine classified reports. The Admiral believed himself safe in the heart of Vorthan space, surrounded by the most advanced security in the galaxy. He had no reason to suspect that human agents had penetrated his stronghold. The charges detonated precisely on schedule, sending shockwaves through the station's superstructure. Emergency alarms began blaring as artificial gravity fluctuated and the lights dimmed. In the confusion, Seung-ho dropped through a ceiling panel directly behind Admiral Vector's chair. The assassination took less than 3 seconds, using a weapon that left no trace. Vector collapsed at his desk, appearing to be another casualty of the industrial accident. His staff would assume he suffered heart failure from the shock of the explosions. Only later would they discover that humanity had reached the highest levels of council leadership. Yoonji was waiting at the extraction point, with engines already spinning up for immediate departure. The stolen fighter looked exactly like any other council vessel, giving them perfect camouflage during their escape. As they pulled away from the dying station, Seung-ho watched secondary explosions tear through the mineral processing facility. The official investigation would conclude that poor maintenance caused a cascade failure in the station's power systems. Admiral Vector's death would be listed as an unfortunate accident that claimed a hero of the Vorthan Empire. The truth would remain classified at levels so high that even most council members would never learn it, but word of the attack spread through the resistance network that Taimin had spent years building. Species oppressed by council policies celebrated the destruction of a facility that represented everything they hated about Vorthan dominance. The impossible had happened, and the most protected installation in the galaxy had been reduced to scrap metal. Taimin met them at a hidden base established on an asteroid in neutral space. The former diplomat now commanded a network of agents from 30 different species, all working to undermine council authority. His latest recruit was a Nexari scientist who provided access to the collective's most sensitive databases. The intelligence they gathered painted a picture of an empire in decline. The council maintained power through fear and overwhelming force, but both were weakening as human attacks continued. Member species were questioning whether the protection offered by the council was worth the price they paid. In freedom, Yoonji had become the most feared pilot in the galaxy, though few council members knew her name. Her squadron of human fighters could appear anywhere without warning and disappear before reinforcements arrived. They had destroyed supply convoys, military installations, and communication arrays across a dozen systems. The council response grew more desperate with each successful human operation. They imposed martial law on rebellious worlds and executed suspected collaborators without trial. But every harsh measure drove more species toward the resistance movement that humanity had inspired. Sung Ho established training camps where human operatives taught alien rebels the techniques of asymmetric warfare. Students learned to build improvised weapons, forge identification documents, and coordinate attacks using encrypted communications. The knowledge spread faster than Council forces could contain it. The most significant breakthrough came when Taman convinced the Altarian Republic to secretly provide military intelligence to human forces. The Altarians had grown tired of Vortan officers commanding their fleets and treating their warriors as expendable troops. They began sharing fleet movements and battle plans that allowed human raiders to strike with perfect timing. Yunji used this intelligence to plan the attack on Kepler Station, the primary Council military base in the Outer Rim. The station commanded 3 star systems and served as headquarters for the fleet tasked with hunting human settlements. Its destruction would cripple Council operations for months. The assault began with Shung Ho's agents infiltrating the station's communication systems and creating false reports of enemy activity in distant sectors. Half the garrison was dispatched to investigate phantom threats, leaving Kepler Station vulnerable to attack. The timing had to be perfect because the deception would not last long. Yunji led a mixed squadron of human and alien fighters against the reduced defenses. Her pilots flew ships that combined the best technology from a dozen species, creating vessels unlike anything the Council had faced. They moved with coordination that spoke of countless hours of joint training. The battle for Kepler Station lasted 6 hours and ended with complete human victory. The surviving Council forces surrendered when it became clear that resistance was hopeless. For the first time in galactic history, a major military installation had fallen to the species the Council had declared too dangerous for civilization. But the real victory was not military, but political. The attack had been carried out by pilots from 7 different species working under human leadership. The alliance that began with desperate exiles had become a coalition capable of challenging Council supremacy. Member species could no longer ignore the reality that alternatives to Vorthan dominance existed. Yujin-O walked through the corridors of the Altarian capital ship Starfire as it approached the neutral system where humanity would hold its first diplomatic summit with former Council members. 2 years had passed since the fall of Kepler. Station and the galaxy was reshaping itself around the reality that Council authority could be challenged. 7 species had formally withdrawn from the Council, while dozens more maintained only token membership. The Altarian Republic had been the first major power to break with the Council after their warriors were used as expendable troops in a failed attack on human colonies. Admiral Donghyun Ryu had turned that assault into a devastating defeat for Council forces while offering honorable surrender to Altarian soldiers who switched sides. The gesture had profound impact on a species that valued military honor above political convenience. Yujin studied the intelligence reports prepared by Sujin Wang, whose teams had achieved the impossible by reverse engineering Council technology and improving upon it. Human factories now produced hyperdrive systems that were faster and more reliable than anything the Vorthans possessed. Communication networks that had taken the Council centuries to build were being replicated in months by human engineers. The diplomatic summit was being held aboard the massive space station humans had built in the Kepler system using salvaged Council materials. The facility was larger than many planetary cities and served as proof that humanity could create as well as destroy. Representatives from 40 species were arriving to discuss alternatives to Council membership. Donghyun Ryu commanded the human fleet that provided security for the summit. His ships incorporated technology from a dozen different species, creating vessels that were uniquely suited to modern warfare. The Admiral had spent years studying Council tactics and knew exactly how to counter them when the inevitable confrontation came. The first day of negotiations revealed the depth of resentment many species felt toward Council policies. The Drakmari, complained about restrictions on their military traditions, while the Solari demanded the right to explore beyond their assigned territories. The hegemony species wanted relief from the crushing taxes that funded Vorthon. Expansion Eugene listened carefully to each complaint and began to see patterns. The Council maintained control by preventing member species from developing capabilities that might threaten Vorthon dominance. Military forces were integrated under Vorthon command, while technological development was regulated to maintain dependency on Council systems. The breakthrough came when Sujin demonstrated human advances in hyperspace navigation. Her team had cracked the mathematical foundations of Council hyperdrive technology and discovered ways to improve efficiency by 30%. More importantly, they had broken the Vorthon monopoly on interstellar travel that had been the foundation of Council power for millennia. Species representatives watched in amazement as Sujin explained how the improvements worked. The technology was not being offered for sale or trade, but was freely shared with any species willing to join the human alliance. This generosity stood in stark contrast to Council policies that hoarded technological advantages. The second day brought news that changed everything. The Nexari Collective had launched a surprise attack on 3 human colonies while their defenders were attending the summit. The machine intelligences had calculated that humanity would not risk starting a larger war by retaliating against Core Council worlds. Dong Hyun proved their calculations wrong within hours. His fleet struck back at Nexari installations across the galaxy in coordinated attacks that demonstrated the true reach of human capabilities. The raids were surgical and precise, targeting only military facilities while avoiding civilian casualties. The message was clear, but the restraint was deliberate. Eugene used the attacks to illustrate the fundamental difference between human leadership and Council dominance. The Nexari had struck at defenseless colonies, hoping to intimidate their enemies through fear. Humanity responded by attacking military targets while protecting innocent lives. One approach sought to terrorize, while the other demonstrated strength tempered by morality. The revelation of human technological capabilities had profound impact on summit negotiations. Species that had remained neutral began to reconsider their positions as they realized the Council's technological advantages were disappearing. The Altarians formally announced their intention to join the Human Alliance, bringing their powerful fleets into the growing coalition. Sujin briefed the assembled delegates on the latest intelligence gathered from Council communications. Her teams had broken their most secure encryption systems, revealing internal debates about how to respond to the human threat. The transcripts showed an empire in crisis, as member species questioned policies that had seemed unshakable for centuries. The most damaging revelation concerned Council military doctrine. The Vorthons had deliberately weakened the fleets of member species by integrating them under centralized command structures that prioritized loyalty over effectiveness. Alien warriors were treated as expendable troops, whose primary purpose was to absorb casualties that might otherwise fall on Vorthon forces. Admiral Dong Hyun used this intelligence to explain why human tactics were so effective against Council forces. Their enemies fought according to rigid doctrines that prioritized political control over military efficiency. Human commanders were trained to adapt and innovate, while Council officers followed predetermined strategies regardless of changing circumstances. The summit's third day brought unexpected visitors as a Vorthon delegation arrived, demanding immediate negotiations. Emperor Vextar himself had come to offer terms for ending what he called the human rebellion. The Vorthon leader still believed he could resolve the crisis through traditional diplomatic pressure. Eugene met with the Vorthon delegation in a chamber, specifically designed to demonstrate human technological capabilities. Holographic displays showed the locations of human colonies across the galaxy, while tactical screens revealed the disposition of allied fleets. The Emperor was seeing for the first time the true scope of humanity's expansion. The negotiations were brief and unproductive. Vextar offered to reduce humanity's exile to a single star system in exchange for ending all hostile activities against council members. The proposal was rejected before the Emperor finished speaking because it demonstrated complete misunderstanding of the situation. Eugen explained that humanity was no longer seeking council membership, but was building something better: the human. Alliance offered genuine partnership between species based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical dominance. Members retained their sovereignty while contributing to collective defense and technological development. The Emperor's response revealed the depth of council desperation. He threatened to destroy Earth itself if human expansion continued, but the threat rang hollow given recent human victories. More importantly, the other species at the summit reacted with horror at the suggestion of genocidal warfare against civilian populations. The Vorthon delegation departed in anger, but their visit had accomplished exactly what Eugen hoped. Every species present had witnessed the fundamental difference between council authoritarianism and human partnership. The choice between two visions of galactic civilization was becoming impossible to ignore. Su Jin delivered the final presentation of the summit, showing how human technology could benefit every member of the Alliance. Medical advances that could extend lifespans were freely shared, along with agricultural techniques that could eliminate hunger on resource-poor worlds. The contrast with council policies of artificial scarcity was stark. The summit concluded with 23 species formally joining the Human Alliance, while another 15 committed to providing covert support. The political map of the galaxy was being redrawn as the Council's grip on power weakened. For the first time in millennia, an alternative to Vorthon dominance seemed possible. Admiral Dong Hyun received reports that Council fleets were massing for a major offensive against human positions. The enemy still possessed numerical superiority, but their advantages were diminishing as more species defected to the Alliance. The coming battle would determine whether the old order could reassert control or if genuine change was inevitable. Eugen stood in the command center of Kepler Station, watching as Allied fleets prepared for the largest space battle in galactic history. Ships from dozens of species worked together with coordination that would have been impossible under Council regulations. Each member contributed their unique capabilities, while human commanders provided overall strategic direction. The intelligence gathered by Su Jin's teams revealed that the Council was planning to attack Earth directly in hopes of ending the war through decapitation strikes. The assault would involve over 1,000 warships in the largest military operation since the formation of the Council itself. Victory would require perfect coordination between allies who had been enemies just years before. But the greatest weapon in humanity's arsenal was not technological, but philosophical. The Alliance offered hope to species that had accepted Council dominance as inevitable. The idea that alternatives were possible had spread beyond military conquest to civilian populations, who began demanding changes in their governments. Ji-hoon Park stood on the bridge of the flagship Humanity's Dream as the largest fleet in galactic history approached Nexus Prime. The massive formation included ships from over 60 species, all flying under the banner of the Galactic Commonwealth that had replaced the failed Council system. What had begun as humanity's exile had transformed into a revolution that swept across the entire galaxy. The final battle for Earth had ended 6 months earlier in complete victory for the Alliance. Admiral Min Young-ko had commanded integrated fleets that turned the Council's numerical superiority into a liability through superior coordination and innovative tactics. The Vorthon Armada, that was supposed to end the war instead, became the catalyst for total Council collapse. Emperor Vextar's flagship had been captured intact, along with detailed records of Council atrocities committed over 3 millennia. The evidence revealed a pattern of oppression that shocked even species that had suffered under Vorthon rule. Entire civilizations had been eliminated for refusing to submit, while others were deliberately kept weak through technological restrictions. Yun Wu, Jiang had spent months analyzing the captured data to design a new system of galactic governance based on equality and mutual respect. The Galactic Commonwealth Charter guaranteed sovereignty for member species while establishing mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution. Military forces remained under local control, but could be coordinated for collective defense. The transformation had not been easy, as some species struggled to abandon habits developed over centuries of council membership. The Nexari collective initially attempted to recreate their hierarchical systems within the Commonwealth structure, but were gradually convinced that cooperation produced better results than domination. Ji-hoon had been elected as the first Commonwealth president by representatives from 73 species in a process that would have been impossible under council regulations. His victory demonstrated that leadership could be earned through merit, rather than inherited through force or accident of birth. The approach to Nexus Prime was carefully choreographed to emphasize the peaceful nature of the Commonwealth transition. No weapons were targeted at the station, and landing parties carried only ceremonial arms. The message was clear that humanity sought to build rather than conquer, despite having the power to impose their will through force. Min Young-ko commanded the escort squadron that included veteran ships from the early days of human exile, alongside vessels from species that had joined the alliance during its rapid expansion. The diversity of the fleet reflected the Commonwealth's fundamental principle that strength came from unity rather than uniformity. The docking procedures were handled by Altarian officers, whose people had become some of humanity's closest allies after their break with the Council. Admiral Terven personally welcomed Ji-hoon to the station that had once served as the seat of galactic oppression, but would now become the center of unprecedented cooperation. The former council chamber had been transformed into a meeting hall, where representatives could speak as equals rather than supplicants seeking favor from their superiors. The rigid hierarchy that once determined seating arrangements was replaced by a circular design that symbolized the Commonwealth's commitment to shared decision-making. Ji-hoon addressed the assembled delegates in the same chamber where Captain Dae-ho Kim had been rejected 8 years earlier. The irony was not lost on anyone present that humanity now stood at the center of a galactic government that included most of their former enemies. The exile that was meant to contain human influence had instead made them leaders of the greatest political transformation in galactic history. The Vorthon Empire still existed, but only as a shadow of its former power, controlling less than 20 star systems in the galactic core. Emperor Vextar had been deposed by his own people after the disastrous Earth campaign left their military in ruins. The new Vorthon government had requested Commonwealth membership, but remained under observation due to concerns about their commitment to democratic principles. Yun-woo presented the final draft of the Commonwealth Constitution to delegates who had spent months debating its provisions. The document established protections for individual rights that had never existed under council rule, while creating institutions capable of managing the complex relationships between dozens of different species. The most revolutionary aspect of the new system was its approach to technological development. Instead of hoarding advances to maintain competitive advantages, the Commonwealth mandated open sharing of all discoveries that could benefit member species. The policy had already accelerated progress beyond anything achieved during millennia of council control. Min Young reported that former council military installations were being converted into research facilities and diplomatic centers. The vast resources once devoted to maintaining oppressive control were being redirected toward exploration and development. Species that had been forbidden from advancing beyond their assigned roles were finally free to pursue their potential. The signing ceremony took place in the chamber's center, where representatives from every member species added their approval to the Commonwealth Charter. Some used traditional writing implements, while others pressed genetic markers or energy signatures onto the document. The diversity of methods reflected the Commonwealth's respect for different cultural practices. Yi-hoon was the last to sign using a pen crafted from metal taken from the original human exile ship. The symbolism was deliberate, as the instrument that marked humanity's greatest triumph had been forged from the vessel that carried them into exile. The journey from rejection to leadership was complete. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days as beings from across the galaxy gathered to mark the end of the old order and the beginning of something unprecedented. Music and art from dozens of cultures filled the station, while scientists and philosophers debated the implications of their new freedom. But the real victory was measured in smaller moments as species that had been enemies for centuries worked together on common projects. Kethera biotechnology merged with human engineering to create medical advances that saved millions of lives. Altarian warriors trained alongside former Council security forces to protect trade routes from the pirates and warlords who thrived in the chaos of transition. The economic transformation was equally dramatic as trade barriers that had enriched. Council elites were dismantled in favor of open markets that benefited ordinary citizens. Species that had been artificially kept poor through taxation and regulation began to prosper as their natural advantages were allowed to flourish. Hyunwoo established the Commonwealth Development Fund using resources seized from council accounts to help struggling worlds build the infrastructure needed for full participation in galactic civilization. The program represented everything the old system had failed to provide by treating development as a right rather than a privilege. The most challenging aspect of the transition involved former council enforcers who had spent their careers maintaining oppressive policies. Some adapted to the new system and became valuable contributors to Commonwealth institutions, while others retreated to isolated worlds where they could maintain their authoritarian traditions. Ji-hoon addressed these challenges with the same patience that had characterized human diplomacy throughout the transition period. The Commonwealth would not impose its values through force, but would demonstrate through example that cooperation produced better results than coercion. The transformation was not complete, as several species remained neutral and a few maintained active hostility toward the Commonwealth. The hegemony worlds had declared independence and established their own federation, while the outer colonies formed a loose confederation that rejected all forms of central authority. But these holdouts only emphasized the voluntary nature of Commonwealth membership, which stood in stark contrast to council policies that had been enforced through military occupation. Species could choose their own path without fear of retaliation, as long as they respected the rights of their neighbors. Captain Dae-ho Kim arrived at Nexus Prime aboard the same ship that had carried humanity's first diplomatic mission 8 years earlier. The elderly officer had been invited to witness the ceremony that vindicated everything he had hoped to achieve during that first failed encounter with galactic civilization. Ji-hoon met with Dae-ho in the observation lounge, where they could see Earth's blue marble hanging in the void, surrounded by the home worlds of humanity's allies. The view reminded them both of how far they had traveled from the dark days when humanity seemed destined for permanent exile. The conversation between the two men was private, but observers noted the respect with which the Commonwealth president treated the officer who had made their current success possible. Dae-ho's refusal to accept council rejection had set in motion the events that transformed the galaxy. The final ceremony took place as delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, carrying news of the Commonwealth's establishment. Ji-hoon delivered a farewell address that emphasized the work still ahead as they built institutions capable of serving dozens of different species with varying needs and traditions.